Hey guys, it's Canadian Kyle here at the Wealth Holders Podcast, and today I'm joined by a CEO of an exploration company. So I haven't had an exploration company on this podcast yet, so I'm pretty excited. The company's Barksdale Resources trades on the OTC market under BRKCF and on the Toronto Stock Exchange, BRO. And today I'm joined with Rick Trotman, CEO and President of Barksdale. Rick, how you doing?
Pretty good, Kyle. How are you doing?
Good, good. Where are you calling in from anyway?
I am working from my lovely basement office today.
Oh, working
So,
working from home. Yeah. And I
yeah,
hear
yeah,
you're a I hear you're a family man too, eh?
yeah, I've got three little boys that are running around upstairs. So you'll probably hear some thumping at some point.
I don't hear
Yeah,
nothing
they
yet,
tend to
but
all be around
how old are they?
7, 5, and 3. So they
Nice.
just never stop running, never stop jumping, climb everything, beat each other up. They're all boys. They just wrestle
Yeah.
constantly. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
pure
We
chaos.
we have I'm one of five. I have four brothers, no
Um,
sisters. And when we were kids, we'd all wrestle before bed. It was fun. So it's good they're all close together. Me and my five brothers are 7 years apart, so I can
Oh wow.
understand the household.
Yeah. It's just organized chaos is how I describe it. But it's
Nice.
fun.
Yeah, of course it is. I saw in your LinkedIn profile picture you had a stringer of fish. Did you take those kids out on the ice fishing or on the lakes yet to go fish? Do they do that?
Yeah, so I take them to a little pond by the house um, to kind of get them into fishing. But no, I think the photo on the LinkedIn profile is probably from up in Alaska. That's where I'm from. So I think I was on the Russian River maybe that time. Um, yeah. So I was going for reds out on the Russian. So it's pretty epic on that river.
Wow, you're Alaskan. Oh, from Alaska. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, I'm from the backwoods. Yep.
Yeah, I we fish walleye around here or pickerel, whoever wants to call them that. I call them walleye,
Yep.
but
Yeah,
so
we have northern pike up, so kind of I guess the little brother of the walleye.
yeah, little, no, northern pike are huge. Walleye aren't that big
I
compared to
think
pike.
walleye can get bigger actually. Yeah.
I'd be surprised. But anyway, today, Rick, I like starting off with a question. I like asking the question, what were you doing when you were my age? I'm 25 years old. So what were you doing in your 20s?
She's 25. Um, 25, I would have been fresh out of graduate school. I probably would have been working um, at Barrick at the time. So I would have been an exploration geologist. At that time, I probably would have been at the Gold Strike mine, um, which is kind of in north central Nevada. It's one of their biggest gold operations. I was drilling out an underground gold deposit there called Banshee at the time, and so it was a bit. Yeah, it was an interesting time frame for me because I was doing these rotational shifts out to Elko, Nevada, and living in Reno, Nevada at the same time. So kind of going out there for 3 weeks, home for a week type of thing. And so it was good, kind of cutting my teeth, learning what an ore body looked like, so to speak.
Right. So how long were you doing field work for it then?
I did a couple of seasons of field work in between like different undergraduate years as well as my grad school years. Um, and then after that, I was in the field for another maybe 4 years full time. And then I kind of moved over to equity research, moved off to New York City and started looking at stocks, kind of working for an analyst that did kind of the ratings, when the stock analyst is telling you to buy, sell, or hold a
Right.
particular stock. And we were focused on all the gold companies, the large cap golds. So
What
it
company
was
was
kind of
this?
my way of branching out and trying to learn new things. It was when I was at HSBC.
HSBC, okay. And then you also spent a long time at Resource Capital Funds, didn't you?
Yeah. So at some point, I kind of got tired of telling people what they should buy and having them never listen. And so I kind of went off to the investing world because I thought that I had decent ideas and I liked investing in stocks. And so I went to private equity that was all mining focused, resource capital. And there I was actually able to invest in what I thought were good ideas. So I don't know, probably put maybe $400 million out the door, investing in things all the way from super early stage spivvy exploration names, for a couple $100,000, up to, I don't know, maybe $125 million in gold companies, to fund construction and things like that. So
Right.
kind of the whole spectrum.
Very
Yeah.
cool. So I have a question for you then. Like, you're a man with 3 kids and a wife at home, and I'm assuming these people must have paid you rather well. So you had a paycheck. What
Mhm.
made you do the leap from employee to CEO?
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't for the pay. No, it was all about ownership, Kyle. I was at the private equity fund, and I saw the guys at the top of the funds, driving around in their Bentleys and private jets and stuff like that, and I was making them some good money, but at the end of the day, I still had to go through committees, and I was writing these big, thick investment memorandums, effectively, trying to outline risk and talk about the pros and cons of doing a particular investment. And again, I just kind of got to the point where I didn't have true ownership, so to speak, and I felt like going out to a company, and I ended up choosing Barksdale, would give me that ownership, right? Like at the end of the day, I could see a direct reaction to my decision-making process. And that's why I went off to the corporate world. Whereas when you're investing, you have a whole portfolio, right? And so
Yep.
you might have some wins and some losses, and they offset or whatnot. And every once in a while you'll have like a nice home run type hit, right? But are you doing it?
Mhm.
Not really. You're making the investment, yeah, but you're not causing the stock to go run, right? So I wanted to be in a spot where my decisions, the strategic decisions, could potentially cause a stock to go up, and obviously me to benefit and everyone else to benefit from that decision making process. So at the end of the day, I
Yeah.
wanted to call the shots. I wanted to be the boss, and I wanted to
Um,
be able to say, okay, I did that, and the outcome was because of some decision I made. So
Very
for
cool.
good or
But
for worse, I guess.
what was the initial feeling like though? Were you like, oh, did I just make a stupid mistake, or was the wife on board? Were you
Oh,
pretty excited?
no, well, it's like starting to date someone, or when you're first married, you're in that honeymoon phase at the beginning, right? Where just nothing can go wrong and everything is just amazing, the best thing in the world. And then the sobering reality of life hits you at some point,
Yeah.
you just slam through that bloody wall and you're like, oh crap, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
And
Now the work's involved.
Oh yeah, and then you got to spend some time figuring out what the hell you just got yourself into, and then you can start laying those foundational tracks, right? But
Mhm.
the grass is always greener, right? And so I know you got a lot of young listeners out there, and I think that's one thing they should probably keep in mind is the grass is always greener. Figure out what your real priorities are and make sure that you're not just chasing things, because at the end of the day, you got to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. I just had um I just had David Cole on the other day here, and we were talking about CEOs and that there's essentially it's a spectrum. The people that start on the technical side, the geology side, like yourself, and then the people that's
Mhm.
get into the more banking and finance side. And you've got experience in both, so I like hearing that. But then I also like categorizing CEOs in the resource space in another two categories. Ones that are more about get rich quick and not really care about the
Mhm.
shareholders. And then the CEOs that are willing to get other people rich first by developing a project,
Mhm.
making something like you said. So my question to you is there any advice to find people like find the right management? Because I've got burned by this a couple of
Mhm.
times in my investment journey. And you being
Okay.
an analyst, like what did you look for in CEOs to make sure they aren't those type of get rich quick CEOs?
Yeah. So when I used to ask those types of questions when I was at the fund, there were a couple of different things, and there's no clear-cut answer. You'd always have to kind of vector in to the right feeling, I guess, is the only way I can describe it. But I think most people always talk about skin of the game, right? You want to make sure that people have skin of the game, but that one you can get burned on, because some people get super dirt cheap penny stock, right? And they have no real ties. So if things don't go well, they can always just walk away, or because there's no real cost base associated with that interest
Right.
that they have. And then you've got those people that want to pump it and dump it, like you were talking about, right? They just want to get the stock from 5 cents to 50 cents, blow it all out, and then they go start the next one. And so there's a couple of ways to vector into these questions. I always started by asking them, what is this company going to look like in 5 years? And that would quickly sort out a lot of the guys that are the pump and dumpers, because they have no fucking clue. Oh, pardon my
That's all
French.
right.
I'm not sure
If you're fine with it, I'm fine with it.
a lot of those guys aren't going to have a clue. They're going to
Yeah.
rattle off some BS about how, they're going to add value, and they're going to be able to raise money at higher and higher prices. And as soon as you start hearing that, that the jig is up. Like these guys are just interested in getting the stock price high enough and liquid enough that they can exit. And if you want to play those types of investments, that's totally fine. You just have to know what you're in for, right? And you got to make sure that you're out before those guys are out, so to speak.
The way you said that, it makes so much more sense, because I saw that coming in one of my investments, and I'm like, oh, but I've already like lost some money, so I was worried about taking a loss. But then the longer you hold it, the more of a loss you make. And should have just got out when the red flags were there.
Yeah. The other thing I always counsel, thing that I would always ask is, how much stock does your wife own?
Oh,
or your husband?
Really?
If you're or your husband, if you're dealing with a female CEO, right? Because a lot of the folks in Canada, I'm American, so I'm going to be a bit critical on Canadians here. Up in Canada, the rules on insider ownership are a bit different than the States, right? In the States, your spouse is a part of your household, and you have to report all of that, right? If your spouse is buying or selling stock in the company that you run, that's an insider transaction. In Canada, it's not necessarily so. And so what you'll see are a lot of these CEOs that set up companies at an early stage and super cheap. They'll get a modest amount of stock for themselves at super cheap prices, but they'll load their spouse up. And so then once the thing is trading and whatnot, you get all this selling coming, and you ask the CEO if they're selling, and they straight face answer you no. But the next question has to be, is your spouse, right? So there's some tricky things about investing in these resource companies that you've got to come in eyes wide open. You got to ask the right questions, and you should also ask around, right? Ask your friends, ask people that might have done business with there previously, right? Just fact check and get to know them, because at the end of the day, in a lot of these resource stocks, you're investing in the people, right?
That's the point of this podcast, is to understand the people. That was eye-popping for me. I didn't know that was a thing in Canada, and that's really good to know.
People will probably give me a rash of heck for saying all this stuff too, probably. But
hey, well, look, the young listeners appreciate it.
If you're out to invest, look, unfortunately, unless someone tells you, the only way you're going to learn this is to get burned. And unfortunately, I've been burned. The people that I know have been burned with these stocks, and it's an important one for young people to know.
Well, I think if you're interested in the space, you have to experience that burn at least once.
You'll never forget it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So let's get into Barksdale now. The one I'm interested first property I'm interested in talking about is Sunnyside, because this is the crown jewel. You've been sitting on it for a couple of years now, and you've been having issues with the permitting. Hey, so this geologist, you own the property, you just can't touch it. You can't put a drill in the ground. So this must be so frustrating for you. It must be like the worst blue balls ever.
As a geologist CEO, yeah, it's excruciating. I'm probably the only CEO in history of resources that has been at the helm for 3 years and hasn't drilled a single drill hole. It's excruciating. Um,
Yeah.
but look, the permitting process for Sunnyside, where it's at, and on the type of land that it's on, it's a it's a 2 to 3 year process to get those permits, and it's painful. It's like watching a glacier go uphill on a cold winter day.
Yeah.
But you know, we're getting close. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We've got a 30-day public comment period on our draft environmental assessment starting in about 10 days. So, you know, this is the downhill stretch at this point. So, you know, the federal government's put a lot of money in, a lot of Barksdale's money and effort into, you know, drafting this environmental assessment, which is quite thick
Hmm.
and comprehensive. And so years of animal studies and emissions data and anything you can think of have kind of gone into this product. So um, we're excited to get this thing over with because we really want to drill this.
Yeah. Why pick such a heavy regulated area then?
It's all about the prize at the end of the road, Kyle. Um, so Sunnyside is part of a bigger system, and the part of that system that's known already is world class. And so that's what is sitting right next door to us at the Hermosa deposit, the Hermosa project, which is owned by South 32. It's got the Taylor sulfide deposit as well as the Clark oxide deposit. You know, it's a couple 100 million tons of good quality resource there. And it abruptly stops at the property line where our project is at. And we've got this big porphyry copper sitting there that kind of generated this whole system. So we know that the likelihood of mineralization being on our property is very high. Unlike most junior resource folks that kind of start with a new project, it's mostly speculation. They've got a good idea, a good thesis, and they're going out to test it. We're beyond that. We know that something is there. It's now our job to figure out how much and what the quality looks like, right? And so we were willing to invest more time, more energy, more money into getting this permit, as big of a pain in the butt as it's been, because we knew that the prize at the end of the road was worthwhile.
Hmm. You touched on some stuff I wanted to cover actually was we know, okay, maybe the best way to start this is something I heard Rick Rule say in the past, which I liked. He said, what did he say now? He said an investor predicts return on capital deployed, a speculator prays for return on capital deployed. And I really want the listeners out there to understand speculation. So if you're invested in an exploration company, it's speculation. Like, and that's fine. I invest and I speculate.
Yep.
But the goal of speculating is to answer as many unanswered questions as possible. And like you said, you haven't drilled a hole yet, but you guys have already answered some questions that a lot of people
Yep.
haven't done.
Yeah. If you look at it from a geologic perspective, yeah, I think there's a bunch of different statistics out there, but kind of geologic prospects. If you look at the conversion ratio from geologic prospect to an actual mining operation, it's something on the order of like 1 out of every 5,000 or 1 out of every 10,000 prospects that are tested end up being mines, right? At the end of the day. And part of a geologist's job is to gather enough data to start increasing likelihood, right? So you go from 1 in 10,000. Maybe if you do some geophysical surveys or you do some, you know, soil sampling, you get more confidence, and maybe you can take that from 1 in 10,000 to, you know, 1 in 500, right? And then maybe if you drill a couple of holes in it and it's showing some promise, maybe you're down to like 1 in 20, right? And then you put a resource on it. You know, you start building confidence by doing more and more work. And So when you're going to invest in these resource stocks, if you've got a pure kind of greenfield exploration play, never been tested, like you said earlier, you're speculating, right? You're taking a big risk that
Hmm.
something is there, but ultimately you want the success to pay off, right? I mean, it's kind of like gambling at the end of the day. You only put the dollar onto the Powerball because you know that you can win potentially, a huge sum. And so the same thing goes with resource stocks. You might invest in some company at 5 cents,
Hmm.
and you've got to understand that that money could all go away, right? With the hopes that maybe it hits $5 at some point if they're successful. And
Hmm.
so I think with Barksdale, we are not in that speculative early stage. There are already drill holes into um, the mineralization that we're looking at that
Yeah.
show it's there. There's a big porphyry copper that's got a number of holes into it. There's a big chalcocite blanket that's got dozens of holes into it. So we know that something's there. So our odds of getting something that's going to be a mine are much better than the fact that the neighbors are building a mine
Hmm.
that will ultimately trend down to our property boundary, then further increases that confidence. So
Yeah. Didn't they find the copper actually discovery on your side of the property line?
yeah, so back in probably the 60s, um, folks came into the area looking for shallow oxide copper, kind of at surface, things that you could in situ, sorry, back then it was more heap leach copper that they were looking to discover, which they did. There's a big chalcocite blanket in on the Sunnyside property, and then around that time they started developing kind of the porphyry copper models that are used today to search for these style of deposits, and that led them to the discovery of the Sunnyside porphyry on the project in probably the late 60s, early 70s. Um, and they kind of drilled it over a couple of years, and ultimately drilling that porphyry, they kind of kept stepping out, and ultimately they tagged into that skarn zone, kind of that polymetallic copper, lead, zinc, silver um, mineralization that we're after today. So that was a byproduct of porphyry copper exploration. And then the folks next door did a great job, Arizona Mining back in the day. They connected the deep sulfide intercepts with a bunch of oxide that was at surface. And lo and behold, the zone kind of connected over a 3 kilometer distance, right? And
Mhm.
that's where the bulk of the deposit was found on their side. And now we've got to fill in and basically drill the gap between the porphyry and the property boundary where we know this world-class system is sitting on the other side of it.
And you keep saying this word, and I just want to make sure my listeners understand what it is. So could you explain what a porphyry
Mhm.
is, and maybe even say like how many have been discovered, how many copper porphyries have been even discovered in the States?
Oh, there's tons. There's tons. Um, so a porphyry is just a failed volcano in its simplest sense. So you can think of kind of like magma, kind of working its way up through the rock column, right? And it kind of like slowly erodes, it like melts and erodes the material above it, and it kind of keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. If it eventually breaches the surface, it'll make a volcano, right? But if it
Right.
doesn't, it ends up cooling in place, and that's a porphyry, right? Now, a certain subset of those have created economic mineralization as part of its emplacement. And those are the ones that we're after, right? So there's lots of porphyries, they're everywhere. There are less mineralized porphyries.
Mhm.
And then of those, there are going to be even less economically viable porphyries, right? And so that's what we're looking for is not only the porphyry itself, but then all of the, let's call it side dishes, right? Like all the accessory mineralization that was created because of the porphyry. And those can include veins. In our case, it's skarns and mantos. And I can explain those better in a couple of minutes. and then the porphyry itself. And so obviously when that magma body is in there, it gives off a lot of heat, right? And it starts these big convection cells with all the water that's in the rocks. And so as that water circulates, it'll pick up metals from the actual porphyry and pull them out. And as they get farther away, they get, the temperature goes down, and that can precipitate out metals. And then as they get closer to surface, the pressure differential can actually cause precipitation of minerals as well. And sorry if I'm geeking out on you here.
No, I like it. I like it. It's really good. So you established that there's obviously world-class deposit here. And what I really like about your company is it's all about the people, and some of those people being shareholders, and you have some phenomenal shareholders backing you. You have Tech Resources, what are they, copper, zinc, nickel, or a mine, Tech, they're backing you. You have Osisko Royalties, you have US Global, and you have the stamp of approval from Eric Sprott, which I always like seeing. So it doesn't matter if it's a world-class deposit, it's about the people. And what did they see in you to get this to come to production, or to actually make something of this property?
Yeah, so I think two things. One, in our team, I think they saw that hunger, that desire, that and the strategy that came along with it to put our plan in action and ultimately execute it over a couple-year period, which, to give them a lot of credit, came with a lot of patience, right? Because they knew right up front that it was going to be a multi-year process, and so they invested on the premise that it was going to take a while. But that's why we went after shareholders of their caliber, right, of their quality, because they're patient, they're long-term patient guys. And then I think the other component to this is I think they trusted the rocks, right? They had a lot of knowledge of the district, they had a lot of knowledge of the project, and then we obviously helped to instill further confidence by showing them the technical data from our side. But to give you some background, Osisko had invested in Arizona mining, and so they had not only become very familiar with the district through that investment, but they also had a royalty over the Arizona mining project. They had a person on the board, and so we approached them because of their already existing confidence in the concept itself, right? And then Tech, this is pure speculation on my part, but they're a big zinc producer, and the project next door is going to be a big lead zinc producer. And so they were active, Tech was active in the district with the San Antonio project, which we later acquired. But you had to kind of think that they were actively looking at Arizona mining from an M&A standpoint. And from that inkling, right, you would have to assume that they were very familiar with the district, very familiar with the rocks and the prospectivity. And so again, we went chasing them because we knew that they had this institutional knowledge already. And so we just had to convince them that we had a good strategy to complement it. And so in this instance, it's not only the team, but it's also the potential and how the team can unlock that potential.
So I have a question for you. You want to build something, like you said that at the beginning. What do you see Barksdale becoming? Do you see it just becoming a takeover target, or do you see it becoming its own mid-tier copper mine, or what do you see in the company?
Yeah, so when I think about Barksdale and the long-term potential, I think about it a bit differently than most, right? Some people think that we're a takeout target. Others think that we're building a company for the long term. And I would say it's both, right? So I plan the business on kind of a 5-year outlook for what we can build, right? What projects can we get into the portfolio? How do we add value to those? And then how do all the projects kind of interplay, right? And so if I look 5 years out, I think that Barksdale can legitimately be a producer of copper, right? And I think San Javier can get us there. Now, how do the other assets kind of roll into here or into that plan? I always want to make sure that the business has optionality, right? That every asset can be advanced, it can be sold, and most importantly, that it can add value through either of those processes, right? And so each project that we get, we want to make sure that we can continue pushing it further and further and further, and ultimately take it to a stage where we can put it into production, right? You have to be willing to follow through all the way. Otherwise, no one will give you any value, right? You'll see a ton of stocks out there that people have resources on. They've had resources on them for years and years and years, and they don't do anything. And then they wonder why their stock price hasn't gone up, and it's just been floundering. It's because they're inactive and they're not willing to push things forward. So with Barksdale, I think we can legitimately have an operating company in a 5-year time frame, and then our assets like Sunnyside give us the ability to have large exploration successes on top of that, which could then lead to helping finance construction of mines. They could, if we were end up selling assets, we could use those proceeds to give dividends out to investors, but always with the idea that we will build, we will add value, we will put money back into the business and make something that is long-term viable, right? And with cash flow and kind of stand on its own 2 feet.
Right. So you picked for 3 of your 4 properties, they're all around the Hermosa mine, which is Four Meadows, San Antonio, and Sunnyside. What made you pick San Javier? Because there was a company that went bankrupt, right, owning that one?
Yeah, indeed. And that's part of the reason that we picked it up, actually. So I want to diversify away from Arizona, quite
Okay.
honestly. So we had critical mass in that Sunnyside district, right? We had, like you said, a number of projects. We'd done a pretty efficient job of consolidating what was available in that district. But ultimately, we had 2 permitting projects in that district, and the news flow off of permitting projects is I mean, it's brain numbing. Like, no one
Yeah.
likes to read permitting updates.
Yep.
It's not the sexiest news in the world, right? At worst, you're going to remind people that you're not drilling, and they're going to get upset and sell your stock.
Yep.
And so what we wanted to, so for years, we've been looking for assets outside of Sunnyside to bring in portfolio, specifically in copper. And we've probably looked at 30 or 40 projects. We've probably conducted deep due diligence on 6, and we've made offers on 2. 3. And this was the one that finally kind of got over the hill. And so we've been looking for a long time. And so this gives us the ability to have a project that we can consistently drill, move forward, and kind of build upon while we are waiting for permits and some of those catalysts that we can't really control timing on up in Arizona, right? We know those values have the potential for lots of exploration success, and hopefully that adds a ton to the share price, so to speak, over time. But we can't count on timing for those. And so we were always looking to bring in another asset to diversify away from that timing risk.
Okay, makes sense. So with that San Javier, there was historical drill results, and I've been looking more into gold companies. So when you're looking at a grade of copper, how does San Javier stand relative to the average?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question, Kyle. When I look at San Javier compared to other similar assets, so other oxide copper style assets,
Yep.
it stacks up. If I was to compare it to a big porphyry copper or sulfide deposit, or maybe a high grade vein, it would be kind of an apples and orange comparison. But if I looked at other oxide copper style deposits, it would hold its weight. The reason that I found San Javier is actually because I was looking to acquire another asset, and in doing so, I always put together a list of comparable projects, right? A comp sheet basically, and I look to I look at different attributes of the target that I'm after versus everything else that's available to make sure that, I kind of keep a cool head, and the decisions that we're making on purchasing something are based in reality, right? So that doesn't only include like the value proposition, but also some of the technical metrics.
Right.
And while I wasn't successful in getting that asset, San Javier was its number one peer, and actually had some, nicer attributes about it. And so when that process fell apart, I went after San Javier because I had done the work to familiarize myself with copper oxide deposits, specifically in this region of the world. And I knew that these were the right types of assets for us. And San Javier was there on the list. So we actually just started making phone calls, found out who owned it, and then started a due diligence process on it.
Okay. So why copper? Like, and maybe I should ask it like this. Okay. You could speculate. We were talking about speculation before for my listeners out there.
Yep.
Why should people speculate in copper and not in gold or cryptocurrencies or tech or pharma? Like why copper, and why did you get so attracted to the copper space? Like you have a good pedigree. Why didn't you go somewhere else? But you chose copper. Like,
Yep. Um, yeah, you are what you know at the end of the day, right? So for me, I know nothing about cryptocurrencies, biotech, any of those types of things, right? Those are all outside of my bailiwick. So I'm going to be more of a danger to myself trying to pick winners in those arenas. I'm going to be useless.
that was for my listeners out there. Why should they pick a copper speculation? Sorry, but go ahead.
Yeah. So picking a copper speculation play at this point in the market makes sense because you're opening your sails and catching the breeze, right? You've got a nice tailwind behind you because the cycle is turning. So every metal kind of goes through its cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have these phases where there's more supply than demand and prices are low, and then that causes operations to go out of production, and capital investment, all these things. And so eventually the cure to low prices are low prices, and the prices start coming up. And that's where we're at right now. And eventually the cure for high prices will be high prices, right? And the price will come back down. But since we're on that uptick, this is the time to invest in the speculative plays. You don't want to play them too early because you can't really time these cycles, right? If you invest too early, you could just get washed out because time will erode your investment, right? The corporations, they have burn rates and they can chew through a lot of your money and not find something. So you want to invest on a spec play when prices are starting to rise and you know that the market is running, right?
Mm-hmm. And today, time of recording, we hit $4 a pound, I think, of copper. So that's pretty significant.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. And we've been looking for new copper assets for 2.5 years because we knew that the cycle would eventually turn, and we wanted to make sure that we had an asset before the copper price started running, because this is the worst time to buy an asset from a corporate perspective, right? Because you're going to pay monumental prices to start an entry, to gain entry at this point in the cycle. So that's why we're very happy that we made our acquisition. We kind of struck that initial deal 6+ months ago. And so, from an spec investment standpoint, this is the time, right? And then you want to be out before the prices start rolling over, which again, you can't really judge the timing on these things. So for the other investors that just kind of believe in the long-term fundamentals of copper, it doesn't really matter when you buy. You just want to make sure that you're not buying in the peaks, right? You can kind of leg into investments over time.
Mm-hmm. And I could only imagine copper spec plays would move heavily because there can't be many out there, is there?
Yeah, the inventory is pretty low. Mm-hmm. So over the next 6 months, what you're going to see is every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to set up a copper company, and you're going to see a million 5-cent deals on some shell that's chasing some moose pasture, something that's been drilled a million times before, but they'll use that as their initial listing property, and then they'll try to parlay that into bigger and better assets. So you're going to see a ton of them coming out here soon. I mean, I'm getting a lot of them across my desk, so I know that they're coming.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of this current phase, right? And then they'll all start putting tons of money into drilling. Some resources will be, established or made better, and in 2 years' time, it'll all go away. As far as the really high prices, so you want to make sure that don't invest in people that you don't think have a good plan, because ultimately, even if they are successful, they can lose out if they don't understand cycles and timing and things of that nature.
Well, we're running close on time here, and I really want to get to the recurrent segment, but I think we really successfully understood who you are and what Barksdale is. So I'm glad to get all this information out of you. So the recurrent segment's called The Vault. And in The Vault, we just ask you 3 questions, and it's more about who you are as an individual and not about the company so much. So the first question is I want to learn what your parents taught you at a young age, and that it's still stuck with you today, because I think that means a lot.
Patience. I think they taught me patience. I was a military kid for the first 10 years of my life, and then I lived out in the sticks for the next 10 years of my life. And I think patience was something that was stressed quite heavily, right? So moving every 2 years, you have to have a lot of patience, because you got to rebuild your friend network over and over and over again. You're living out in the middle of nowhere. You have to be patient as well, because things come a lot slower. So that's what I got from them.
Give you a little background on myself. My parents live out in, our closest neighbor must be, I don't know, 8, 10, maybe more kilometers away, and we still live with wood stoves. And you patience is key. Like, people are so distracted, but out there, internet, they only have a certain amount of bandwidth a month, and you gotta do something. And yeah, I think patience is learned through those remote areas 100%.
Absolutely. I had 3 channels when I grew
up. Yeah, exactly. So next question is more about mentors that you've learned from, and I'll ask, what could you name 1 or 2 wealth holders or high net worth individuals that have influenced you and your career in a positive way? If you don't want to share names, that's fine too. But.
Yeah, I won't share a name, but absolutely. There's one in particular that stressed how important it is to remain calm. So in this business, well, I guess in any business really, when you have to make a big decision, a lot of people get stressed out, and they get excited, or they allow others to get them excited, and they kind of lose focus, right? They get too jacked up, and sometimes they make the wrong decisions because they're just going with the flow, or other people have gotten them excited about something. And at the end of the day, you got to stay calm, so that you can focus and make sure that you're making the decision for the right reasons.
That's awesome. Yeah, just like define a few seconds in a game, or when you're hunting and you just see a deer, like, you got to get in the zone, you got to get your nerves in check, and for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And just don't let other people push around your ideas, right? Like, if you have done the work and you are confident, be calm, and make what you think is the right decision. Don't let other people pull you around.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last question is what kind of advice from your journey in life, what kind of advice could you give a 25-year-old like myself that's just starting his?
Plant seeds now. Yeah, plant seeds. So the best thing that a 25-year-old could do is, 1, think about what they want to do when they're 35, but 2, work on your network, because people are going to be the most important resource that you collect over the years, right? Whether it's friends or colleagues or whatnot, you want to
Yeah.
build those relationships, because let's just put it this way. I've never applied for a job in my life, after college, right? It's all been through word of mouth, or you know people kind of talking about things, and it works, that works. But it's very important, your relationships and the people that you surround yourself with. So spend time. Like, don't spend all of your time looking at your iPhone. Pick up the phone, call people. Yeah,
That's
build
one
those
thing
relationships.
I always do is if I'm sitting down and I'm at my kitchen dinner table by myself, I'm like, well, just sitting here. I always just don't even think about it. Pick up a phone, call someone I haven't called in a while, and it
Yep.
makes a big
And
difference. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't make
yep.
the calls.
Well, and a lot of people are afraid as well. Like, so if you're doing some research on a company, right, and you don't know anybody that knows that company, like, call them, talk to them,
Yeah.
right? Like, a lot of people are afraid to do that, but just just taking that extra step, they can give you information, it can make the difference between a good decision and a bad decision, right, on the investment front. So don't be afraid to reach out, build relationships, even if you don't invest in that company. It's good to know them, because they might go off and do something that you really like, and then you can kind of stand behind them and invest in them, right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah.
Well, I think this has been my best podcast yet. This is awesome. But I always like leaving it to you to finish off and close up and say anything you would want to say, anything you can disclose about Barksdale, uh, anything at all.
Uh, yeah, look, I think I've laid out most of the rationale as to why I'm there and why I, own all the stock that I own. Owning Barksdale requires more patience than other stocks. I'll have to admit, it's not going to be, glitzy and glamorous, and we're not going to be pumping this thing up every week. But just know that we've got a plan, and we are methodical in our approach to walking the walk, right? So
Well, I'm excited to see what's to come with Barksdale. Maybe we'll have you
me
on
too.
again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Rick, and you have a good
Okay,
day.
of course. Thanks, Kyle.
Bye.